You're telling me I'm going to be 100% blind and 100% deaf. So I'm just sitting trapped in my body, unable to walk around on my own. And the thoughts this time were, why me? What did I do? I mean, I wasn't a bad guy. What did I do to deserve it twice? Haven't I paid my fair share? Hasn't this soldier paid his dues? I did. The why me is the what ifs, right? Those questions that don't have any answer. And if you keep asking and you keep asking the wrong questions, you're going to get nowhere.
What was the right questions?
It was more like all those service members up and down the halls, they're going through their own personal battles. Who am I to say that I have this monopoly on pain? Who am I to say that my injury or my situation is too hard and that I have a good excuse to quit? I don't. What kind of example would I be setting for my son if I said I'd quit? I decided that if I was going to be blind for the rest of my life, I was going to be the best damn blind Aaron Hale I possibly could be.
Welcome back to the Resilient Show. Today, I'm just extremely honored. The guest that we have on today is an American hero and just a very unique and special person. Talking to him right before the show and learning about him as an upcoming guest, I'm just very personally inspired by Aaron Hale. And I'm going to read his bio. Aaron Hale served our nation for 14 years in both the United States Navy as a chef to the commander of the U.S. 6th Fleet and in the Army as a team leader in explosive ordnance disposal, EOD. And for those that don't know, especially in a war on terror, being EOD is one of the most dangerous jobs that you could possibly have, especially with IEDs and all the things that we dealt with in a war on terror. Aaron served on 1 deployment to Iraq, 2 deployments to Afghanistan, numerous awards, including the Purple Heart. During combat operations, Aaron was severely wounded by the detonation of an improvised explosive device, IED, and he was left permanently blind. Overcoming his injuries, Aaron defied all expectations, and he became a EOD instructor, a motivational speaker, mountain climber, whitewater kayaker, a marathon runner, and a podcaster. 4 years later, after overcoming the injuries he suffered in combat, Aaron faced another life-altering challenge when bacterial meningitis took his hearing, rendering him completely deaf. Aaron now shares his story through speaking engagements. He runs marathons. He co-manages a thriving chocolate company with his wife, EOD Fudge, and I hope you brought some fudge with you today. In 2023, Aaron made history by being the first blind and deaf person to complete the world's toughest foot race, the Badwater 135. He's a dedicated husband, father of 3, real estate investor, and the host of the Point of Impact podcast. Aaron, super excited and honored to have you on the show.
Absolutely. Chad, thanks for having me on. I tell people I went from Navy chef to Army bomb squad because after I got my first confirmed kill with an egg roll, I wanted to start saving lives instead.
In the bio, you guys heard me mention not only is Aaron totally blind, but he's also totally deaf. And so you might be asking the same thing I asked when I first spoke to Aaron. It was, how will we do an interview? And so Aaron has a cochlear implant?
That's right.
Okay. And so I have a microphone on me that goes directly into not really his ear, but in the side of his skull that he's hearing me through vibrations.
Yeah, it's kind of like, being blind and deaf. Without this thing right here, I'd be pulling the full Helen Keller.
Yeah.
Definitely not with as much grace. It's kind of like trying to figure out what's going on in the kitchen through the drive-through speaker.
Yeah.
It's a bit fuzzy. It's definitely a bit digitized, and it's nothing like the real thing. But I tell you what, the technology today is way better than the alternative. When I first went deaf, it was like I was completely cut off from the outside world. My entire world ended at my fingertips. It was totally dark, totally silent. It was very lonely, very frustrating, very isolating. When COVID happened and everybody was in quarantine, the lockdowns. Everybody was complaining about the isolation. Like, this is nothing. Look at my world. My girlfriend at the time, my wife now, used to write every single letter of every word she wanted to say to me in the palm of my hand. And of course, Army guy, capital block letters. That's how I communicated for almost a year, actually, while I was waiting for the meningitis to clear the infection, and then surgeries to do both ears and get tuned in. And that was a long process.
Yeah.
Before I could actually hear another human voice again.
Yeah, and now you're able to do a podcast. And so if you hear me, a lot of people that listen to this podcast know that I'm from Louisiana. I speak really fast sometimes when I get excited, and I also slur because that's what we do in Louisiana. I'm slowing it down for Aaron because he asked me to. Some of you may be even thankful, but next episode I'm going to speed it back up again. So there's a lot of areas that I want to talk to you about, but I'd really like to just know, before the military, I know you grew up in Ohio. We got the Ohio backdrop behind you. Can you tell us about how you grew up, where you grew up? What was childhood like before the military?
Yeah, I grew up in rural Ohio, and it was, I don't know, pretty vanilla life. I loved it. Suburbs, football, played lacrosse. My high school days were probably some of my favorite. But also led to was kind of a comfort, complacency. I didn't really have a whole lot of ambition because I was really happy where I was. And then I went to college, and I didn't have the work ethic, that aptitude or reason for achievement. So everybody who knew how to work hard quickly passed me by. And after a few semesters and, that freshman 50, I found myself out of school without a diploma and really ashamed of myself, very embarrassed, and needed to turn things around. Up until about a month before I enlisted, I absolutely knew that I would never be in the service. What
was it about the military you did not want?
The whole process for that was one of those, I have no idea type of things, which branch, what to do, what was available. I just knew I loved to cook. And when it came to the branches, I didn't want to do those combat arms. I didn't even know that was what it was called. So,
yeah.
But I didn't want to be sent to the battlefield. I just wanted to do some kind of support role. So I guess I'd already eliminated the Marines and the Army. And when it came to the Air Force and the Navy, I had no idea about airplanes. That was about it. So I'd seen, growing up, you see that Let the Adventure Begin. The Navy had great recruiting commercials.
Yeah.
And I love to travel. I want to see the world. And they have cooks. So I joined the Navy. And I was looking to get values, the hard work ethic, the ability to wake up in the morning to an alarm clock and just do a hard day's work and accomplish something. The Navy certainly gave that to me. And while I was also looking for that tuition money, I literally pissed away.
Yeah.
In college. So I was going to earn the GI Bill, and I decided I was going to go to culinary school and become a certified chef. That was the plan. 4 years and out, right?
Yeah.
Except, 8 years later, I'd fallen in love with service. And I'd also gotten these extrinsic, the external values of duty, loyalty, honor, all the cool core values that they pump into you, and the pride in being a member of something, part of something so much bigger.
Yeah.
And I loved being a sailor. I loved being out to sea and travel in the world. And I worked my way up to cooking for the Admiral. I was proud of being a member of this fleet.
Were you the chef for the commander of the 6th Fleet? And for those that don't know, that's a really big deal. Like, you're the personal chef of the Admiral and his guests and as he's entertaining, and it's more than just cooking.
Yeah, well, it's funny. In the 8 years I'd served in the Navy, I'd never worked in your regular ship's galley.
Yeah.
In fact, my first duty station in Naples, Italy, was actually they don't tell you this at the recruiter station, but Navy cooks, at least at the time, they kind of look at it like the civilian equivalent of hotel restaurant management. And for us, the hotels were the barracks. So I get off the plane going, where am I going to cook? And they say, oh, no, no, no. You're going to be handing out the keys and linens on the night watch at the front desk of the queue. Oh. But from there, I volunteered for the base commander doing receptions. That got me the recommendation to go to the flag duty. It was only a 45-minute PCS. There is where I got to experience this real cooking, not the Navy cooking. After basic training, the A school, the training, the service school, mostly focuses on how not to kill somebody out at sea, sanitation standards and all that. But I got to cook real food, real cuisine. The only rule was when we were in port, because the admiral wasn't, he was a burger and fries kind of guy. But his only rule was no Italian food while we're in port. Yeah, mostly because, close of business for, 1600. Everybody packs up the office and heads into Italy where they live. Why would you have the American cooks make Italian food?
Yeah. How did you transition? How did you make a decision to be, I'm a chef for the admiral, and now I want to be in the Army and go into EOD and deal with bombs on the battlefield in the middle of the war on terror? How'd you make that decision?
That's a bit of a course correction.
Yeah.
Changing uniforms and going from cook to bomb tech. Yeah, definitely a switch. This was about 2004. Yeah, I joined in 1999. It was peacetime as a cook. And remember, I was getting those selfish goals. And then I got the unselfish stuff kind of along with the package. And I loved being in the Navy, I loved cooking, but all of a sudden we found ourselves in two wars. And even though everybody's got a role to play in the military, every job is important, I just, I didn't feel as though my talents and abilities and this newfound pride and service were being put to the best use. I was watching both wars unfold on the television, even though I was on board the ship. So I volunteered for my first deployment to Afghanistan as a cook, and I went for cooking for the admiral and his top brass, about 35 or so, to cooking for hundreds of ISAF NATO troops in the middle of Farah, Afghanistan. I was filling an Army billet, running the chow hall, the DFAC, in Afghanistan. Ironically enough, or coincidentally, there were a couple platoons of Italian special forces there, so I got to practice the lingo I'd learned in Italy, in Afghanistan. But it was while I was on that first deployment as a cook that I met some EOD techs. These guys had dumped out all the gear from their armored truck, the Jerv, and they had the bomb suits and robots and all that stuff out in the parking lot right by the chow hall doing PMCS, maintenance checks on everything, make sure batteries and everything work. And I went and just struck up a conversation with these guys and found out about the technical aspect of the job, the challenge it was. And I found out about the tight-knit brotherhood within the military, just like special forces. These guys are tight-knit. And the fact that it's a first responder job. It's a life-saving job on the battlefield. Everything about it just clicked. This is what I was meant to do. So I put in my chit, that request to go from Navy cook to Navy bomb tech. and it was promptly denied. I guess they like my cooking too much. But the truth was that it's just all about manpower. My
Yeah.
rank was undermanned. The next rank up was also overmanned. So not only weren't they going to let me go EOD, they weren't letting me go anywhere, even up. So when that deployment was nearing an end, so was my contract. I just let it expire, ended my enlistment with the Navy, and went over to an Army recruiter, and I handed over my service record and said, I want to go EOD. And of course, with the battlefield being what it was overseas, they were eager to take on a new EOD recruit.
Yeah. What was the training like?
It was interesting going from sailor to soldier.
You had to go to boot camp all over, basic training?
Yeah, it was definitely different. But I didn't go to basic training.
Okay.
They had this, it was like a pilot program called the Warrior Transition Course. It's like a gentleman's school, gentleman version of basic, where you get the knowledge-based stuff, the physical fitness stuff, but you don't get the indoctrination, the dogma.
And learn about the Army, the rank structure, the history, tradition.
Most of the recruits, or students, so to speak, were the same rank as the drill sergeants. It's like, you drop. No, you drop. But the truth was, it was fine. You live in the open bay. You do some of the soldiering stuff. But in truth, I was wearing a different uniform, but I'm still kind of a salty sailor at heart. And then after becoming an official soldier, then I'll go to the AOD school. And in truth, when I look back on it, it was like I went from sailor to EOD rather than sailor to soldier. And nothing against the Army.
How many months is Army EOD school?
Well, the EOD school, every branch has their own phase one, but then they send all of their EOD candidates to the joint. It's a Navy-run school at Eglin Air Force Base in the Florida Panhandle. So, and part of the reason is that everybody learns the same stuff. And everybody learns how to speak the same language. Across branches, the same word means different things. And you're not allowed to say hooah or hoo-yah or hoorah, because that alone can mean 100 different things. So everybody learns how to speak the same language. They all learn EOD together. So when it comes to go time on the battlefield, you can pair an Air Force tech with a Marine tech, and they can just work together seamlessly when it really counts. And
Interesting. Yeah.
the training is in total about a year long. You take a test on something on average every 2 to 3 days. So the op tempo, the student tempo there it's high paced. There's a high attrition rate, and it's challenging, but it's mostly knowledge-based stuff. Because there's so many munitions out there, hundreds of thousands of munitions that you can't teach every single one. So you got to go down to the basics: electronics, chemistry, physics, and the basic ordnance identification. There's so much. It's part of what brings us all together, is the challenge just of getting through the school.
You become an Army EOD tech, and you deploy to Iraq or Afghanistan first?
Iraq.
And so what was operations like in Iraq? I mean, you're dealing with new types of munitions on a battlefield as IEDs and Soleimani's guys out there planning.
In Iraq, this was, by the time I deployed there, it was about 2010. Mm-hmm. And President Obama was in office we're pulling out, handing everything over to our Iraqi partners. So what was interesting about that is that I got to transfer over from Navy to Army, keeping my E5 rank. I had some time in service, so I was promoted pretty quickly to staff sergeant. But that is a team leader rank, and I was expected not just to learn how to be an EOD tech, but learn how to be a team leader fast. So I was assigned as the fourth person on a 3-person team with another sergeant team leader. And I was expected to learn the job and that position, like drinking from a fire hose. So what happened was once I got to Iraq, they also placed me in the triage section of the counter-explosive exploitation cell of Task Force Troy. And this is where the evidence from the battlefield comes. So I talked a little bit about ordnance, but the other part of our mission are those IEDs, improvised explosive devices. And yeah, of course, Iraq and Afghanistan are just littered with them. And for EOD techs, part of their role is like the CSI on the battlefield. So we do post-blast analysis. We collect evidence on IEDs that are found before they've exploded. And we collect evidence and we send it up to this sexy cell. And from there, it gets that triage where it goes from one central location out to biometrics, chemical analysis, electronic analysis, and it all gets collated and then packaged to all of the intelligence agencies.
You're trying to find who the bomb makers are, where the manufacturing of these bombs are, to be able to take out the source and not just the bombs. Correct?
Exactly right. So to speak, you say left of the bang. Right? The whole timeline from that bang, the detonation, left of that timeline would be the emplacement. Who's the bomb emplacer? Who's the bomb maker? Who's the supplier? Who's the financier? And just like the TV shows where, or movies where the bomb maker has a certain signature, how many twists in the wire or whatever. Right. Of course, in Afghanistan and sometimes even in Iraq, fingerprints are like voodoo to these guys. Mm-hmm. We try to get the signature, the actual fingerprints as well, but we want to get further down that line left of the bang.
Yeah. What would you say? So what's the difference, Afghanistan, Iraq as a EOD tech? I mean, I've been to Afghanistan a ton of time, 8 times, and I've never been to Iraq, but I've worked with a lot of guys who've been both places, and you talk about a lot of distinctions and differences on the battlefield. Is it the same with the types of ordnance you were seeing?
Iraq and Afghanistan were totally different, night and day. Iraq, it was very sophisticated. The insurgents there were being trained, and it's no secret they were being supplied by the Iranians.
Yeah, the Cud is out there.
And they were very agile when it came to fighting our defenses. Remember those Rhino mounts and the infrared and the different types of IEDs our convoys were running into. Whereas in Afghanistan, 99.9% of what we were finding, at least in 2011 when I deployed for my second time, it was the same thing. A vegetable oil jug with homemade explosives, ammonia nitrate, and aluminum, basically fertilizer. And it would a 9-volt battery, a lamp cord, and a plywood pressure plate every single time. Mm-hmm. So it was just the only difference there was that reason it was so effective is they had littered the place with it. And what a fellow Marine tech say it perfectly is that every step in Afghanistan was a deliberate act.
Yeah.
So it wasn't about sophistication. It was just about quantity.
Even, from my experience in Afghanistan, even the ordnance that was not intentionally placed as IED. I mean, I remember driving, I would drive the Khyber Pass a lot from Kabul and then Jalalabad, and you stop on the side of the road to take a leak, and you can't walk off because there's old ordnance from Russian airdrops everywhere. So there's just a lot of the whole country is just littered with ordnance.
Yeah, absolutely right. And that's what got me in 2011 was a simple pressure plate. And the only reason there was it hadn't yet been detected. So I was working on one pressure plate, and this was the one quirk about the incident was that
You're talking about your injury to your eyes.
this was the Kandahar province.
Okay.
It's a little bit west of Kandahar, just outside. It's still within the stadium lights of Fob Wilson.
Okay.
It was I guess later called Fob Passab. Right on Highway 1. And the quirky part about it, though, the two ways the ANP, Afghan National Police, tell us about IEDs. One is they just kind of rip them out of the ground and bring them right to our ECP. Like, here, look what I found. Or they call it in and they don't touch it. And that really doesn't ever happen. So I was literally coming back to the battlefield from my 2 weeks of R&R. Went back home, got to see my firstborn turn 1. Got to witness the whole family get together for Thanksgiving. It was like the best last page in the photo album I could have wished for. But I just put my travel bags, put it on the robot in the back, my team, and I, pulled our JERV into just a logistics convoy heading towards our command outpost from Fob Wilson, virtually right outside the gate, just maybe a mile and a half or so out. Convoy commander calls back and says, EOD, there's something on the side of the road called in from AMP, and we need you to take a look at it. It wasn't even our AO QRF could have come out, but we were already there. So set up that security cordon and threw the baggage off the robot out of the truck, and we got to work. And same thing we always find, that pressure plate IED. And the robot made short work of it, ripped it apart. But what it couldn't do was pull that jug out of the hard-packed earth. And like I explained, I wanted to get as much evidence as I possibly could. So I hopped out with my metal detector and evidence kit over my shoulder, and I started walking towards it. And about 20 or 30 meters from the original IED, there was that secondary device. Just detected it with my foot.
You stepped on it with your foot?
I imagine so.
Okay.
I mean, all I knew was that my metal detector was trying to tell me something really important. Mm-hmm. It was making that beeping sound. And I really don't understand how it was configured, because all I knew was that the lights went out, my bell got rung, I got tossed into the air and landed on my knees and elbows. And I was still conscious, definitely not very lucid, but I was awake. And the first thing that I thought was that my helmet had just gotten pushed over my face from the blast.
What type of equipment did you have on? I mean, I know sometimes we see guys in EOD with the big bomb suits. Were you in a bomb suit? Were you just in fatigues with body armor on? Like, what kind of equipment did you have on?
I did not have the bomb suit.
Okay.
The rule there was that, the first approach would be in a bomb suit or by robot on any unknown device. And since I'd already had the known device, the known hazard rendered more or less safe, the robot had actually taken the pressure plate and ripped it away from the device. So there was no reason to be in a bomb suit. So I was in your standard PPE. Plate carrier, K-POC, Kevlar.
Yeah.
And standard battle rattle. Thinking that the helmet had been pushed over my head, I reached up to grab it though, and it was gone. The first thing I thought then was, oh no, this is bad. My first sergeant's going to kill me for losing that. Yeah. It's funny what goes through your head.
Yeah.
Muscle memory training clicked on, and I was thinking of a complex ambush. Were they going to start firing at us? What's going on around me? SOP when a team leader goes down is the team members, the EOD team members, have to clear a safe path to the team leader so medics can get to them or they can drag them out to a safe area. And all I was thinking was, I don't want anybody else in this, potentially hazardous area. And again, not very lucid. I stood up and did my first zombie walk back towards the truck. But of course, I had no idea where the truck was. So I'm just an idiot walking around the battlefield, making it even more difficult for, my guys to get to me. One of my team members grabbed me, dragged me back to our truck. The medics came, running in from the cordon. And within about 14 minutes, remember, we're not too far from Kandahar Airfield. With about 14 minutes, the medevac was touching down and taking me right back where I came from.
Did you have any eye protection on?
I did have eye pro, but just like my helmet, it got blasted right off. So the blast overpressure, that blast wave you see, that moves faster than the frag coming after it. So the blast had taken my helmet and my eye protection right off. It actually kind of smashed my cheek and cracked my skull, but it blew one of my eyes right out. And then frag and heat, the piece of frag cut right across the bridge of my nose and gashed the other eye. And then the flame, the heat came right after that and seared my eyelids on this eye closed. So I had this kind of permanent until surgeons opened that back up. The cracks in my skull led to leakage of the cerebral spinal fluid right out of my sinuses and out my nose. That wasn't the big issue at the moment. It was getting me off the battlefield, and within about 48 hours, I was at Walter Reed.
When you were first injured, was there any pain? I know I talked to guys in different stories. Some guys are in pain. Some guys say that, they didn't feel anything.
I don't know. Talking about feeling it in the moment, I didn't feel any pain.
Yeah.
It was like it happened too fast.
Yeah.
It was just a quick blast to my head, and I don't know if it's us Hale boys, a really thick skulls, so it was a perfect place to hit me.
Yeah.
But I was virtually untouched from my neck down, which is also strange because pressure plate buried underground. I'm just guessing that the insurgents in Afghanistan, remember, they're not real creative, but somebody told them about our metal detectors, and they don't understand metal detection. They just understand this. They understood this wand that was finding their 9-volt batteries. So what they were doing was they were fair-leading the batteries off to a side. And then they would have the pressure plate and the charge, the explosive, right in the path. And of course, that made it more challenging. But then after about 24 hours, there'd be this concavity and a little ant trail. And it was just plain as day.
Yeah.
But then every once in a while, you'd find a pressure plate here and a charge over there. And even one time I found the battery off to the side around one of those mud culotte walls. But my metal detector was going haywire. I was going crazy because instead of a jug of HME, they've turned a couple Chinese mortars into their charge. So it was the same pressure plate, 9-volt, but then they just charged into the fuse well of these 2 big pieces of iron.
Yeah.
So obviously you don't understand the metal detection, but when it came to the thing that got me was that the pressure plate was here and the charge that was in this hard-packed earth was right beside me.
Yeah. And so probably saved your legs and potentially your life.
I'm certainly grateful, for the injuries I sustained, and It could have been a lot worse.
You know, I've heard a lot of people talk about battlefield injuries, and if you can make it to the cache, field medical centers, you have like, if you can make it there, you have like a 90% chance of living. And, you know, so thankfully they were able to get you there quickly. What was that process like for you, getting to, you know, the first phase of medical care?
Yeah, the medical care was great. All the way from the medevac chopper to roll 3 to Walter Reed. That was the thing about getting to the hospital, back to the United States and Bethesda, was that the care, whether it was medical care, whether it was mental, you know, there was just people coming and going constantly. And what I learned very quickly on was that 100% blindness also comes with the added bonus gift of a sleep disorder, because my circadian rhythm doesn't reset with sunlight, you know, that internal clock. So
I never thought about that. It's like kind of maybe
Yeah.
like you go to Alaska and you can't sleep, right? Because of,
Yeah, exactly. So but that sleep wake cycle doesn't sync up.
yeah.
So I got there, and I'm dealing with new sleep disorder and surgeries and doctors and volunteers and nurses and, you know, x-rays and all this other stuff. Plus, you're right on the beltway. So we've got elected officials and civil service people coming and shaking hands, saying thank you, and nonprofits coming in. What do you need? I'm like, I have no idea. And barely a second during the day to think, but I was wide awake all night in my head. And I was mad.
Yeah.
I was so mad. I was pissed off. I was pissed off at the Army. I was pissed off at the Taliban. I was pissed off at the president. I was pissed off really at myself.
Yeah.
I was so mad. You know, these men with the rudimentary thing that I've been practiced on for 8 months straight, I let one through. They got one on me. And here I was, blind for the rest of my life.
When did you find out that you were blind? How'd you get the news? I mean, obviously you knew you couldn't see, but you know, sometimes you're injured and you're like, okay, this is going to get better. But who informed you? How'd you know, like, I'm never going to be able to see again?
You know, I think I knew it from the get-go, but I didn't want to accept it.
Yeah.
And the left eye that had the gash in it, they did do a surgery to see if they could save it. And after the surgery, the doctor came in, you know, took the bandage off, and he said, okay, let me, you know, flash this light, and you see if you can see any light. And there was nothing. In fact, I think I told him, because also what was going on were hallucinations. I think I actually told him I might have seen something out of this one, and that eye was gone.
Mm-hmm. So it's like memory, right? You have this memory that what you saw before.
Those hallucinations, it's just a defense that your brain does.
Yeah.
It kind of throws up images, you know, on what now a suddenly empty canvas.
Yeah.
I'm not sure why certain images were thrown up there, but it's trying. You know, your brain's this incredible computer. Yeah. Even today, this is what I do: is I try to piece together my environment from the input I get, and I guess it's assumed that 96% of the information we get in through all of our senses, most of it is through eyesight. So we rely quite a bit, very heavily on eyesight, just to think about our language. See you later. Watch your step. You know, we don't have alternatives for some of these things. Yeah. But so I found out maybe about 2 weeks after the blast that I'd be blind forever. I guess by then I'd already started accepting it. It was just confirmation. So yeah, I'm kind of stewing in my own anger and regret and remorse and all that. And it was my family, my mom who would come in, and she's an incredibly strong woman. Years before me, my younger brother, had been through his own traumatic incident, a roadside construction accident, and forever injured, damaged, traumatic. He'd actually been in a coma for months, and for 6 months he had to learn how to walk again, speak again, and she was right there by his side. So when she came into the hospital that first time, she came in, "Hi, honey," and the first thing I could think of was, "I'm so sorry, Mom, for doing this to your other son." And she said, "Oh, honey, not my first rodeo. We're going to be fine."
Yeah.
So that helped me turn my thoughts around. Then one of my fellow team leaders in the same company had just been injured 2 weeks before me. In fact, while I was home on my R&R, we were in the DC area, and I heard about his injury, and I was the first one to see him come out of ICU, Kyle Vickers. And they wouldn't tell me what his injury was. So, of course, confidentiality. But they said you could wait in his room. He'll be out of ICU soon. So go in there, and they have those like care package clothing on one of the chairs beside his bed, and it was like a hoodie, sweats, t-shirt, shorts, and one shoe. And when they wheeled him in, you could see under the sheet, there's just one leg. I don't know if it was the drugs wearing off from surgery or just his personality, but he saw me come in. He had this big, dumb looking grin on his face. "Hale, what are you doing here? You're supposed to be in Afghanistan." "I came all the way to see you, buddy." But it was Kyle. It helped me get through mine, so to speak, dark time. Because he just had the kind of personality. He's like, "Dude, the blast to get me, I think I kicked myself in the face." You can't help but laugh. I wanted to be pissed off. And then, this 2 weeks later, I'm in the hospital just down the hall from Kyle, and he comes wheeling in. He's like, "Dude, give me your hand." "Why?" Text, just like operators, they could have quirky, sense of humor.
Yeah.
And he grabs my hand and he puts it right under his chin. He goes, "Feel that? It's 2 weeks of growth." Right? Unheard of. And he goes, "Yeah, apparently the Marine EOD techs here have this liaison, this attaché guy, a representative from the Marine Corps. And as soon as they come out of surgery, he asks, 'How are you doing?' If they say fine, he hands them a razor and say, 'Get back in the regs.' We don't have that, dude. It's driving them crazy. You got to grow your beard out." So, of course, with him and my mom, and I just started thinking again, about all the other warriors. Mm-hmm. Yeah, all those service members up and down the halls. They're going through their own personal battles. Who am I to say that I have this monopoly on pain? Who am I to say that my injury or my situation is too hard? It's harder than anybody else's, and that I have a good excuse to quit. I don't.
Right.
With those excuses taken away, it's my responsibility. I'm responsible to my family. I'm responsible to the Army and all the other service members. They're fighting the fight, and I'm still a soldier. I'm still sergeant. Still EOD. I wear these hats, right?
Yeah.
And I still have to live up to those roles. I'm still a father, and I can't just say, what kind of example would I be setting for my son if I said I quit? And that's when I decided that if I was going to be blind for the rest of my life, I was going to be the best damn blind Aaron Hale I could be. It was just hard work, right? And I wasn't unused to hard work. It was just learning how to be blind first.
Right.
And it's everything. You don't even think about it. Why would I have ever thought of what it was like to be blind in so much detail? Sure. I mean, how do I pair my socks? How do I get the right amount of toothpaste on my brush? All this stuff. And Walter Reed, they're mostly about they work with those big trauma stuff like loss of limbs and prosthetics and all that. I didn't have any of that for them to worry about. So once they cleaned my face up, so to speak, of course, not to forget, filled in that crack in my skull. They took a piece of my septum and patched up the hole. And of course, later that would come into play. But once they were all done with me, they sent me to Augusta, Georgia, to the VA hospital there. They've got one of, I think it's about 14 now, of the blind rehabilitation centers. And it's just blind school. And I was learning how to do those living school skills, learning how to use the technology. I didn't have the cochlear implant. I could still hear at the time. I mean, lost a little bit on one side, but I was learning how to use the voiceover, the text-to-speech software on my phone and my computer, and trying to bring the world as accessible to me as possible. It was a time to work out my patience muscle and be as curious as I possibly could about what is possible and stop thinking about what I couldn't do anymore.
Yeah. You don't leave the military right away. You go back and become an EOD instructor. Is that as a military service member that you're an EOD instructor or post-military?
I think I was the first blind EOD instructor, but I was not the first blind active duty service member. Guys like Captain Scott Smiley went on to take command of a warrior transition unit. It's basically a wounded warrior company in the Army with the number of non-fatal casualties from both wars had set up these entire commands for processing service members soldiers that were injured. So he took command of one such company. There was Ivan Castro, who was Army Ranger, went to Special Operations Recruiting Branch at Bragg. And I learned about these guys. I got to talk to some of them. And when they asked me, where do you want to retire? I said, I don't. Maybe it was a little bit of denial there.
Yeah.
But if those guys could do it, I could stay on. I could keep the uniform. I couldn't do the job because they don't even want colorblind guys working EOD, the whole red wire, blue wire thing. But I could go to the schoolhouse. I could teach what I know. So for about a year and a half, I was that old man on the soapbox talking about what I'd learned in Afghanistan to the next batch that would go out and fill the role. It was at that time when I was also trying to figure out how to lose weight again, because they feed you like you're going through buds at the hospital. I mean, mounds of food. I don't know why, but if it was in front of me, I was going to eat it. I love eating. I started trying to figure out how to go for a run. It's not in my best interest just to lace up and head out the front door. So I got to figure out how to run with a sighted guide. But while I was doing using my accessible phone or computer to do internet searches, I was doing blind plus run, blind plus fitness, blind plus outside, anything that would keep me off the couch. Because I knew that was that was a sticky place. That was where despair, depression was, on the couch. That's where I would eventually crawl into a bottle or a pill bottle or, just live a very probably short life. So I wanted to get up. I wanted to get active. And as I was doing these searches, a few names kept popping up. Like Eric Weinmeier is the first blind person to climb Mount Everest. Lonnie Bedwell, the Navy vet, who was the first blind person to kayak the entire Colorado River through the Grand Canyon. So I looked these guys up. And you know what? I went mountain climbing with Eric. I went kayaking with Lonnie. I talked to Ivan at Special Operations Recruiting Branch, and just talked to him over the phone. And he told me that he made it a point every year to run the Air Force Marathon, the Army 10-miler, and the Marine Corps Marathon. And I thought, that sounds cool. I think I'll do that. And I registered for those 3 races. Then I got talked into the Pensacola Marathon and the San Antonio Rock and Roll Marathon. And all of a sudden, through some sort of exuberance, I'd registered for these 5 races within the span of 4 months. And I probably hadn't run anything longer than a 10K in my life. So I was biting off a lot more than I can chew. It was just starting to gnaw, and I'd better learn. These are the things I was doing while I was still active duty, but the med board process is about a year long. And by the time they came back to me and said, all right, are you ready to do the COAD, continuation of active duty service, which is the request to stay active, or do you want to retire? And I said, you know what? I don't have anything else to prove in service. I've got these other things, and I'm going to see what it's like on the outside again. So I took my retirement, and I began speaking, doing more of these adventures, running more races, and generally trying to do my best as a blind person.
And then, and you had a lot of success doing that. And then another very big challenge enters when you get the bacterial meningitis.
I was having a pretty epic year in 2015.
Yeah.
Besides getting a fairly decent grasp on the blindness thing, I went skydiving for the first time. It's kind of like, without the visual part, it's kind of like sticking your head out a fast car.
Yeah. There's no feeling. I do a lot of jumping, and there's no feeling of falling.
The best part of that was just letting go of the airplane, and then it was waiting for the time when you like hit the ground.
Yeah,
it was cool, but yeah, I wish I could have seen that. But I'd also climbed 3 14ers in a day, Colorado. I went hunting, exotic game ranch in San Antonio.
Yeah.
I'd went kayaking with Lonnie again. I was doing all this thing. I ran the Boston Marathon. I was speaking. I was having so much fun. I was really enjoying my life. And I came home. I was on the phone as I entered the house. Just came back from one such adventure, and I was on the phone with a new girlfriend of mine who would become my wife. And I felt really fatigued. I was really tired. And then like a bout of the strangest dizziness. It wasn't even dizziness. It was like my balance just went away. And I wasn't sure if I was falling or if I was just standing still. But I didn't want to overreact and crumple for fear of I would actually then smack my head on the countertop or something. And I would just wait. And then the balance would come back for a moment. So I said, you know what? I don't know what's going on here. I'm going to lay down for a nap. I'll call you back later. I went to sleep, and I don't know if it was 5 minutes or an hour later, but I woke up with the worst, I don't know what to call it, migraine. Ate a fistful of Tylenol and puked it back up from the pain. And I knew very quickly that I needed to call 911. And it was it was kind of funny, a little embarrassing. It's like the operator goes, "You state the nature of the emergency." And I said, "I have a really bad headache." She, to her credit, she just goes, "On a scale of 1 to 10, how bad's the pain?" And I said, "Man, I've never felt a pain like this in my life, and I've literally been blown up before." She said, "The ambulance is on its way." And before I knew it, I was back in the hospital. And what had happened was that crack in my skull that had been patched up, I guess either it hadn't been completely patched or reopened. And I was leaking spinal fluid again, but a path out is a path in, and bacterial meningitis crept in there. And it was trying to eat my brain. And that's what it felt like. Somebody just poured acid into my head. And it was trying to kill me. I wasn't lucid for about 4 days. And my mom said, "Oh, those poor nurses, there was about 8 of them trying to hold you down because you were so confused and scared and angry. And they tried to strap you, broke your restraints. And those little girls were trying to hold you down." But then I came out of the stupor about 4 days later, and it felt as though I was underwater. My hearing was just muffled, and it was fading pretty quickly. And the doctor said that bacterial meningitis was stealing what was left of my hearing that the bomb blast hadn't taken. And the only response I could have thought of at the time was, "Doc, you're telling me I'm going to be 100% blind and 100% deaf. I'm never going to have to pretend to pay attention ever again?" Silver lining to everything. Mm-hmm. Of course, the hearing loss had been, extensive enough by then that I didn't hear my mom or my girlfriend who had come into town laugh at that joke. I attribute that to the hearing loss. They must have. Humor, I use it to diffuse the difficult situations. I'm not hiding from it. It's my way of looking at the bright side as soon as I possibly can.
Yeah.
I'll deal with the tough stuff. I don't ignore it. But I've made it a practice to instantly look at the positive first. There's got to be something to learn from every situation. There's got to be an upside. I mean, I was in the hospital for about a month and a half. They did what they could, but the hearing loss was complete. And I got home. Also, the hearing loss, the meningitis, it came with its own bonus gift. Just like the sleep disorder and the blindness, I lost my inner ear balance, the vestibular balance with my hearing loss. So I came home in a wheelchair and locked in my body. So I'm just sitting at my counter, trapped in my body, unable to walk around on my own. And again, the thoughts this time were why me? What did I do? I mean, I wasn't a bad guy. What did I do to deserve it twice? Haven't I paid my fair share? Hasn't this soldier paid his dues? I did. The why me is the what ifs, right? Those questions that don't have any answer. And if you keep asking and you keep asking the wrong questions, you're going to get nowhere.
What was the right questions?
It was more like, instead of, like saying, I can't, mm-hmm. It was asking, how can I?
Yeah.
It was just, okay, this is the situation. There was a chance that I could regain some of my hearing through the cochlear implants, but it was going to take a long time. So
like a year, right?
Yeah, it was the infection had to fully clear. Then they would do surgery on the right ear first. And then you had to let the surgical site heal, and then you could do the process or the outer side, portion. And then there was this whole tuning in, they call it mapping, where if like in audio visual terms, they would give you as little information as possible. It's like, say, like just the primary colors, just a few octaves or tones or whatever you want to call it. And then as your brain learns to hear this new way, and it understands the digital signal, then you can add more information. But it's a slow, drawn-out process. And what happened was we found out on the right side is that the blast damage, there was too much scarring in the cochlea, in the inner ear area, that the signal wasn't getting through. So they had that thing turned up to their full power. I remember if it was like a loud clap, a bang, or laughter or something, there would be enough to understand that it was a loud sound. But the physical effect, there would be enough of a charge that it would make my cheek twitch. So I'd have this twitch anytime there was a loud noise, which caused my girlfriend and my mom to laugh, which would cause it to twitch again. I'm like, stop it. But we knew very quickly that it was useless.
So out of 4, you both your eyes, both your ears, you're down to 1 chance left, and that's your left ear.
Well, I was pretty disappointed because it was Stockdale paradox.
Yeah.
Talking about the Admiral Stockdale being a POW, and it's like, when did you know they were about to go, to give up? It was the hopeful, the people that said, the Americans would rescue us by Easter. And Easter would come and go. And they said, just move the goalpost, okay, by Thanksgiving, by Christmas. And eventually they would just say, they're not coming, because they just based it on blind hope. Well, I kind of did that with the first cochlear implant. It got turned on and it didn't work. I'd put all my faith in the hope that it would just turn on and I would hear again. That deflated me so bad. And it just sunk me back into depression. But eventually, the second device did work. It just was a long, long process. What I did was I stopped thinking about myself, and I turned the focus again outwards. And it seems to be how I got through everything in my life. If I found myself in a bad spot, it wasn't about thinking less of myself. It was thinking of myself less. So it was right about Thanksgiving time, the holidays. And I just said, I don't want to think about my situation. Let's have a Thanksgiving feast. We're going to host right here. I'm going to make the biggest dinner. We're going to invite the whole family all over the country. We're going to have friends. We even invited some of the EOD students that, sometimes, TDY or training school over the holidays, the base shuts down, but you're kind of, young guys are kind of stuck without leave days or money.
Sure.
So we invite a few of the EOD students to come share our table. And there was going to be this huge crowd. So I started cooking weeks in advance, and I was making like 2 different birds in one in the smoke or one in the oven, ham, all the trimmings, turn all the vegetables into something really unhealthy. And the desserts, oh man, I was making pies and cakes and cookies, and I would just put it in the freezer until the day. And it was funny, I started making fudge. And I would do a batch of fudge, and I'd set it to the side. And I was like, that was pretty good. Let's try this flavor or this different type of flavor. And I would do one batch after another, and I would do like nuts and spices, and I'd go to the liquor cabinet and a little there, a little for me. And it was so funny. Michaela, my wife, said she noticed 2 things. One was a smile on my face. She hadn't seen that in about 6 months. I was having a good time again. I was having fun cooking. If I couldn't see it, I couldn't hear it, but I knew how to cook. And it was therapeutic. The other thing she noticed was that the fudge was piling up. So there was more desserts than any family of any size could have gone through in a holiday. So she started sneaking it out the front door. Say sneaking, like you got to be real stealthy around a blind guy. a blind deaf guy. And she was giving it away, neighbors, friends. And, a couple of people started coming back and asking, can we, I got a birthday party or, baby shower. Can we buy some of this from you? Capitalist in me said, of course you may. And all of a sudden we had this business.
EOD Fudge. And it's not EOD, Explosive Ordnance Disposal. It's
Extraordinary Delights.
Extraordinary Delights. Yes.
A little nod to my previous occupation.
Yeah.
But our first sale went out on our own platter, and we had to get that back. But
And if anybody wants any, where could they go?
EODfudge.com.
That's easy. Get your fudge from EODfudge.com. So there's so many things like being a chef, being a business owner, you're in real estate, you're speaking, you have your own podcast, you're climbing mountains, you're running multiple marathons, you're doing all this stuff that's very impressive and very inspiring. But one of the things that I was just most impressed about is today you come in here and I ask, I see you're by yourself, and I say, who are you here with? And you said, just me. And it really took me back because you live in Florida and we're here in Texas. You're completely blind. You're completely deaf minus your cochlear implant, which is very challenging in a normal setting. I got a microphone on to talk to you right now. And you traveled from Florida to Texas by yourself, and you got to the studio, and some people can't.
But you said it
the
yourself.
excuses people have not to be able to do stuff. I mean, navigating the airport, deaf and blind, I'm beyond impressed. It blew me away.
You said it yourself about jiu-jitsu, right? It's not about the challenge or your opponent. You do it because you're up against your former self.
Yes.
Right? You do it to grow stronger, to be a little bit better than yourself yesterday. That's why I went from marathons to ultra marathons, because sitting still, being stagnant, is kind of a misnomer. You're either moving forward or you're degrading, you're moving backwards. Once you become complacent in a situation, I wanted to be the best I can be. And I wanted to set up a legacy. And that's not just financial wealth to be handed down to my children. Something even more important is I was given an opportunity to make the best of my situation so that I could teach my children how to make the best of the hardships ahead of them. So I do this so that I can be the best dad I possibly can. I've got 3 boys now. My firstborn's 13. And now we have identical twin 5-year-olds because, of course, I didn't want to be the only one that was confused. But that's a challenge in and of itself.
Yeah.
But they need a father. And it doesn't matter that I'm blind and deaf.
Yeah.
I do these things to challenge my former self so I can get better.
So what's your family like, home dynamic like? I mean, you talked about your wife spelling words in your hand. Your kids, as your kids grow up, that's something that may seem normal to them, but there's extra things they're learning that other kids are not learning, how to communicate with you and have a dad with the challenges that you have. Even though you're overcoming them, it's still a reality of everyday life. What's that like in your household?
Being a parent's tough enough.
Yeah.
There were so many times where it would have been challenging by itself with all of my senses. I remember when Cameron, my oldest, was just a toddler, and he maybe gotten into a little trouble. And he said, "Cameron, come here." And I would hear him suck in his breath, and I knew he was hugging a wall, so he would disappear. And I would just stand there and wait until he would gasp for air. Oh, I'm like, "Gotcha." And then he would just yell "no" and run away. But you know what? The boys, kids, they're so intuitive, so adaptive.
Yeah.
They come, and if they can't express it verbally, they would grab my hand, "Come, Dad, take a look." Mm-hmm. and they put my hands on it. And they would explain it excitedly, or they would be apologizing for whatever they broke. But it's just a learning experience, and you got to be optimistic. You got to be grounded in that faith. Just like the paradox is that you got to be grounded in the faith of a good outcome.
Yeah. You talk about faith, the Resilient Show as we built the show based on these 4 pillars of resiliency, and we talked to guests like you who are super inspiring, and others who have like information that can provide to make people more resilient. But at this core in the military, it's just adopted from the military, the 4 pillars of mind being mentally tough, having the right attitude and perspective, body being physically fit and taking care of yourself, being healthy, socially surrounding yourself with the right people, and having a strong spiritual foundation. Clearly, you have one of the most incredible mindsets I've witnessed, and I've been around some incredible humans. Just amazing perspective. You're physically, you're just crushing it, taking care of yourself, and overcoming all the physical challenges you have by being the most optimal you could be physically, and socially. It sounds like you're surrounded by the right people. I'm curious about your spiritual faith. I'm a Christian, and I gained a lot of the stuff that I dealt with over my time and my recovery. Really came down to the restoration of my faith as a Christian, and having a belief in a creator. How you're talking a lot about faith. Where do you fall in the realm of spirituality?
I was not raised religious.
Yeah.
And as far as faith goes, I haven't crossed that logical gap. The faith part.
Yeah.
I believe in Christian values.
Mm-hmm.
I believe that the Bible is a great instructional manual for how to behave as a human.
Yeah.
I'm open to it. I for some reason, I'm not sure why I haven't been able to cross that void.
I won't go on an evangelical journey with you here on the show. I'd be happy to have that conversation with you anytime. But I'm curious, do you,
I believe,
mostly like the agnostic, do you believe like you were created, or you believe like from a atheistic standpoint, and we're agnostic, you just don't know?
I think even the term agnostic, we've changed the definition over time.
Yeah.
From the Greek gnosis to know. And agnostics believed they had a faith.
They did.
And they believed in God. Was that it was outside the church. Whereas nowadays agnostics, the definition would just say that they're not sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
For me, perhaps that's where I fall.
Yeah.
But I do believe in a higher power. I do believe that not everything can be explained entirely by science, that there's got to be intelligent creation.
Yeah.
And that there's something out there guiding, maybe more faithful than I believe.
Sure.
But maybe it's in practice.
Yeah, I knew a lot of my audience would be interested in where you stood on that. I will say this, like I said, I'm happy to answer any questions you ever have on that as you try to figure that out yourself. But I'll tell you, from me being a believer, I certainly believe that God has had his hand over you, man. Like, and that inspiration and passion and for life that you have, and that positive attitude you have comes from the Creator. And man, God loves you and clearly has protected you, and has an amazing purpose for you moving forward. And I love seeing you live it out, coming on a show like this, going to speak, doing things to inspire others, leading your family well. You're an amazing human, and I'm real honored that you come and have this conversation with us today.
I believe, and I heard this somewhere, I don't even know where it probably came from, a Facebook meme or something, but perhaps someday the story of your struggle may be the blueprint for someone else's survival.
Absolutely.
And that alone, to tell somebody that, yeah, I've been through a hard time.
Yeah.
I don't know your pain. Everybody's pain is unique, but I know pain and I know struggle. So here's what's worked for me. Take it or leave it, but I'm glad to share. Yeah. And I'm glad to help where I can.
My last question for you, to those listening, I think a lot of us struggle with things, and we face our own, little pity parties, and and lose perspective on how bad things could be. What would you say to those listening who are maybe your situation is bad, but it could be worse, and there's always hope, there's always a way forward? What would you say to people that are stuck?
I think it was in General Mattis's book called Sign Chaos.
Yeah.
Where he said, at least in the Marines, things being hard were never a reason for mission failure or a good excuse for mission failure. And I always relate that back to EOD, where a 3-person team is given like a quad con or a tri-con. It's like a shipping container full of tools for every type of ordnance or explosive, hazmat gear, power tools, robots, bomb suits. And then you get to the battlefield and you get that armored truck, which doesn't have the storage capacity that the shipping container does. So you got to do a bit of a triage and cram as many tools as you can get in there and leave some behind. Mm-hmm. And then you go to Afghanistan, and there are no roads. It's all on foot. You're dismount, so you can only bring the tools you can pack on your back. And I got to leave some tools behind. You can't worry about the tools that you don't have access to. You still got to do the mission, right? You still got to move forward. So I just look at it like this. I had to leave some tools behind. Things are going to get hard. I still have a mission, and things being hard is not a good excuse for mission failure.
Yes. Wise words, man. Very honored to have you on. Closing the show out, we have some amazing sponsors that make this show possible, that appreciate you being here. Smith & Wesson, Vortex Optics, Gators, Eyewear, good eye protection. And we have a swag bag from Mighty Oaks Foundation, BioPro, BioAccelerator, who is a stem cell company that operates in Medellin, Colombia, but they're actually a U.S. company based out of Scottsdale, Arizona. And then Ally Wealth Management, some amazing people who make this show possible. So we got some of those gifts for you. I've seen some pictures of you speaking, even with glasses on. So Gators would love you to wear their glasses. I talked to you just about the show, but I kind of didn't know what to do. I'm like, am I gonna be the irresponsible person that gives a Smith & Wesson firearm to a guy that can't see, or am I gonna be the jerk who the only guest that on our show that doesn't get a Smith & Wesson firearm is Aaron, who lost his eyesight and serviced our country. So I decided we're giving you this gun, Smith & Wesson, one of the greatest companies in America, most patriotic companies, and been around 170 years. We're going to give you a gun. And one of the things you said jokingly back was, I hope you have a good optic that gives good magnification for you. And so we have a Vortex Optic, another amazing company that we're partnered with that's going to put an optic on, and you could do what you want to do with it. But man, these companies appreciate you. I appreciate you. And so thankful to have you on the show. I'm going to reach across the table here and give you a handshake.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Appreciate it.
Man, I'm so honored to have spoke to Aaron. He is, I know you guys heard him here, but he's just a phenomenal human being. If you, I know a lot of people reach out to Mighty Oaks for veteran speakers. If you ever need a speaker, incredible story, obviously, get some of his Fudge. And just support this guys, kind of American patriots and heroes that served in our nation that we want to get behind and support. So honor for me to have him on the show. And as a Grateful Nation, these are the kind of guys that we need to get behind and help just lock arms with them on our journey forward. He's just an inspiration, and I hope you guys will support this guy. God bless. Hey guys, thank you for watching this episode of The Resilient Show. I hope you enjoyed it. If you hadn't already, please click subscribe so you don't miss any future content. We have so many amazing guests scheduled, and you don't want to miss it.